I sighed heavily and turned, leaving him in the room. Other newlyweds get up pretty late the day after the wedding after a steamy night with their husbands, but here I am, unable to share a bathroom with mine. How am I going to cope throughout these 2 months? I knocked on the door of the guest room twice before I heard a voice say, "Come in." "Good morning, Grandma. Sorry to disturb you," I said as soon as I entered the room and switched on the lights. "It's fine. You have to be in New York and your clothes are here," Grandma Nini said, giving me a small smile. "Though I don't understand why Jason couldn't let you share his bathroom." She mumbled the last part, but I heard it clearly. "I don't know either. What's so bad about sharing his bathroom? I can help him grab water from the refrigerator when the power's out, but I can't share his bathroom. What a joke." I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. I just pretended not to hear what Grandma said and brought out a one-piece yellow dress that my best friend Max got for me last summer. The dress cost a fortune, and it's probably the only dress I own that cost over $100. I only wore it once, and it was to a party Max hosted. After that day, I dumped it in my box because I felt out of place in it, but today, I feel like I can wear it. Besides, I'm the wife of Jason Tech. I should act like it. I brushed my teeth and took my bath and then put on the yellow dress with a black jacket to go while styling my curly hair in a ponytail, which didn't turn out how I expected it to. I wore my only fashionable boots and picked up my box, which I hadn't unpacked yet, and bid Grandma goodbye, but she was already asleep despite the lights that were still on. I switched off the lights and got out of the guest room only to bump into Jason at the door. "Drop your box. You can't wear those clothes around me in New York. What do you expect people to say?" He scoffed as he took one good look at me and walked away. I rolled my eyes, opened the door, and dropped the box back in the room. What would it cost him to say that politely? I mumbled as I quickly followed him downstairs before he said something rude to me again. We went straight to the parking lot and met Clinton waiting to take us to the airport. "The meeting is at 8. I heard Clinton say to him, and he simply huffed and got into the car. I got into the car quietly without saying anything because there really wasn't anything much to say. The drive to the airport was smooth until my phone started to ring. I tried to put it on silent, but I failed at that because if eyes could kill, the way Jason glared at me, I would be 6 feet underground already. "Switch it off or pick it up," Jason said, and I almost smiled because what he said rhymed. I mumbled, contemplating on what to do before deciding to pick it up. He looked at me with a look that said, "I'm so not done with you," before looking away outside the window. "Hello," I said, trying to sound as quiet as possible. "Hey, you bitch." Max's voice resonated through the call, and I was forced to smile. But it wasn't a fake one. "Why didn't you tell me you got married?" "I had to hear that from your mom." "Oh my gosh, bitch. That's the worst thing you could ever do to me. If not because of my abuelita, I would be there right now to beat your small ass." Max said it all at once, and I was tempted to laugh because Max could be very funny when he was mad, but the ride was quiet and I knew Jason, and Clinton could hear my conversations with Max, so I didn't. Max, I'll call you back. This is your number, right? I said quietly, yes. He said, understanding that I didn't want to talk right now. Okay, I said, and I hung up and switched off my phone. The rest of the ride to the airport was so quiet. It was almost suffocating, but I would prefer that over Jason bickering with me early in the morning. We arrived at the airport and boarded the plane. The only time I was on a plane was probably years back when I saved up a lot of money to go on a school trip, which was where I met Max. Max Salazar is Mexican and speaks 3 different languages. He speaks English, Spanish, and a little bit of French, although I'm guessing he's already speaking a little bit of Korean since his never-dying crush on the Korean boy band. BTS is huge. But that field trip that year was one of the best things that happened to me. I was lost in the city of Mexico. I can't remember the name of the particular town we went to, but I got lost and I couldn't communicate with the locals there. Max helped me through that, and I knew I found my best friend then and there. Although when I returned back home, my parents were angry and furious to know that I had saved up a lot of money to travel the world when they were struggling to make ends meet. And that was the end of my trip. I didn't have a phone, so Max and I couldn't communicate, but when I met him years later in the university, that was when I knew we were destined to be friends. Max tried to convince me to be his model because he was into fashion, but I didn't, because I didn't want to depend on him, but then he had to go home because his grandma was in the hospital and asked me to go with him, but I refused because of my parents and he went alone. I wondered if I wouldn't be seated here with Jason if I had followed Max to Mexico. But of course, I knew life wasn't that simple. Can I get you anything, ma'am? An air hostess asked me, but as I was about to answer, Jason, who sat down beside me, shook his head saying no. I gave her a light smile as she walked away. She probably thought he was being the nicest husband answering questions for his wife, but he was simply not the nicest person. He is nothing close to being nice. I looked outside the window and stared into the clouds as I tried to reminisce on other stuff that I had done growing that was out of the ordinary, but nothing was coming to my head. All I could think of was how furious Max would be at me. In the last few days, I was just trying to avoid being poor without receiving help from my friends, not like I had a lot or the ones I had were even rich or stable, except Max, of course. But in that little space of time, I had forgotten to tell Max what I had done and why I had done what I did. I felt really bad that I did not tell him even when he came out to me that he was gay years ago, but I'm sure he would understand. I hope he will understand. I wasn't sure when I drifted to sleep, but my slumber was cut off when I felt a harsh tap on my shoulders and I jolted out of my reverie. Get ready to land. Jason said to me coldly, and I nodded as I wiped the drool off my chin. We soon landed, and we were out of the airport when a car pulled up in front of us. The driver came out to open the door for us. Hi, I'm Jade, and I'm taking you to your hotel. Mr. Clinton called. The driver, Jade, said. Okay, Jason said, getting into the car. I followed suit, and soon we were on the road to the hotel. Would you like something to drink? Jade asked. No, Jason said quietly. Should I turn up the radio? Jade asked again. No, shut up and focus on driving. Jason snapped, and I could see Jade's smile turn into a frown through the mirror, and I wish I could apologize on Jason's behalf, but I just kept quiet. He just had to show everyone what an inconsiderate, rude jerk he was. I looked out of the window and tried to take in the beautiful view of New York City. It is truly a beautiful city. I don't know what awaits me here, but I'm sure it won't be any better than what I've faced in the past few days, but hopefully I'll survive through this, and in 2 months, this will all be over. Hopefully. The car ride through New York City felt like an eternity, not because of the distance, but because of the stifling atmosphere inside. Jason's cold demeanor, which had initially been merely an annoyance, was now becoming suffocating. Every word he spoke seemed calculated to remind me of my insignificance in his life. I leaned back in my seat, trying to make myself as small as possible, as if I could somehow disappear into the fabric of the upholstery. The city outside was alive with energy, the streets bustling with people and cars, the tall buildings casting long shadows in the early morning light. It was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile environment inside the car. I used to dream of visiting New York, exploring its streets, visiting its landmarks, and maybe even catching a Broadway show. Now, the city felt like a cage, another place where I was trapped in this charade of a marriage. We arrived at the hotel, a towering structure of glass and steel that seemed to touch the sky. As we stepped out of the car, I noticed the way people glanced at us. They saw Jason, impeccably dressed and exuding an aura of power and wealth, and then they saw me, in my simple dress and cheap boots, clearly out of place. I could feel their judgmental stares piercing through me, making me want to shrink away and hide. Let's get this over with, Jason muttered, leading the way into the hotel lobby. The staff greeted us with professional smiles, but there was a hint of something else in their eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or pity. Jason didn't seem to notice or care. He was too focused on the task at hand, whatever that might be. We checked into our suite without much fuss. The room was as luxurious as one would expect, with a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The king-sized bed, draped in expensive linens, took up most of the space. There was a couch near the window and a small table with a vase of fresh flowers, an attempt, perhaps, to soften the otherwise starkly modern decor. Take whatever you need, Jason said, his voice flat and emotionless. I'm heading to the office. The meeting will take most of the day. You should stay here and rest. We'll talk later about what comes next. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the vast, empty suite. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, feeling a mix of relief and resentment. Relief that he was gone, and resentment at how he had spoken to me, as if I were a child in need of supervision or a prisoner with no say in my own life. I wandered over to the window and looked out at the city below. From this height, everything seemed so small and insignificant, just like me. I thought about calling Max, but then I remembered that I had turned off my phone. I didn't want to deal with his questions, his anger, or his disappointment in me. Not yet, anyway. Instead, I walked over to the couch and sank into its plush cushions. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but there was one feeling that stood out above the rest: loneliness. I had never felt so alone in my life. Not even when I was struggling to make ends meet. Not even when I had to sell my dream of being an independent woman to marry a stranger for the sake of my family. At least then, I had my parents and Max. Now, I had no one. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, trying to shut out the world. Maybe Jason was right. Maybe I was just a burden, someone who didn't deserve more than the bare minimum. Maybe this was my fate, to live in a gilded cage, trapped by circumstances beyond my control. But as I sat there, a spark of defiance began to grow within me. I didn't know where it came from, but I wasn't ready to give up. I might be trapped in this marriage, but I wasn't powerless. I still had a voice, a will, and a mind of my own. If Jason thought he could control me, he was wrong. I would find a way to regain my independence, to carve out a life for myself within the confines of this arrangement. The day dragged on, each minute ticking by with excruciating slowness. I tried to occupy myself by exploring the suite, but there wasn't much to do. I flipped through the channels on the TV, but nothing held my interest for long. I tried reading a book I found on one of the shelves, but I couldn't focus on the words. My thoughts kept drifting back to my situation, to the life I had left behind and the uncertain future that lay ahead. By the time the sun began to set, I was pacing the room, feeling like a caged animal. I hated feeling this way, restless, anxious, and trapped. I needed to get out, to breathe some fresh air, to clear my head. But Jason had told me to stay put, and I didn't want to risk making him angry. Not yet, at least.